because this lesson answers a lot of questions that I have, and I would agree. I would agree with everybody that chimed in tonight. It's hard to trust God's timing, especially when you don't know what He's doing. All right, it seems like God is silent. It seems like God is not moving. It seems like God is not working, and that's very difficult for us to believe. And then we'll come in church. We'll come in church and we'll say He's an on-time God. Yes, He is, but I don't trust it. I don't trust His timing, but He's an on-time God. Yes, He is. All right. So here's the challenge. Here's the challenge. We know that God is at work. We know that God is at work, and so the first 3 weeks we talked about behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, God is regulating what's allowed. All right. So while you're waiting, and while you're trying to figure out what He's doing, know this: He's regulating what's allowed. All right. And then behind the scenes, God is preparing you for what's next. A lot of people say you want it right now, but I come to tell you, based on these lessons we've taught, you can't handle it right now. All right. If God gave you what you wanted when you wanted before He prepared you, you would mess it up. All right. And matter of fact, that's probably why we're in the situation and we need miracles, because sometimes God says, okay, let me go ahead and give it to them and prove to them that they're not ready. All right. So God is preparing you for what's next. And then behind the scenes, God is fighting battles you can't see. All right. And then behind the scenes, God is producing proven character. And then last but not least, behind the scenes, God is producing humility within you. So, all right. So God is doing some things. He's regulating. He's preparing you. He's fighting battles. He's producing proven character and producing humility in you. All right. So let's jump into the second one. Let's jump into this passage tonight. Last week we looked at Joseph. Last we looked at how God was working in the life of Joseph. So tonight I want to look at Esther. We've all know that one line in Esther. Even if we hadn't read the whole book of Esther, we know that one line. Who knows? Who knows if God has prepared you, has sent you for such a time as this? We know that line, but tonight I want to walk through the book of Esther and show you how those principles apply to the life of Esther. All right. So in chapter 2, verse number 5. Listen to what it says. At that time, there was a Jewish man in the fortress of Susa whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. His family had been among those who, with King Jehoiakim of Judah, had been exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. This man had a very beautiful and lovely young cousin, Hadassah, whose name was also called Esther. When her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her into his family and raised her as his own daughter. So that's one of our key passages we want to look at tonight. So that passage tells us that Esther's mother and father died, and Mordecai raised her as his own daughter, and they were both taken into exile. All right, so that's key. Esther chapter 4, verse 13, Mordecai sent this reply to Esther: don't think for a minute that because you're in the palace, you will not escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just a time as this. And then Esther chapter 10, it says, King Xerxes imposed a tribute throughout his empire, even to the distant coastlands. His great achievements and the full account of his greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Media and Persia. Mordecai, the Jew, became the prime minister with authority next to that of King Xerxes himself. He was very great among the Jews, who held him in such high esteem because he continued to work for the good of his people and to speak up for the welfare of all their descendants. In chapter 2, we see that Esther's mother and father died. Mordecai took her in. Mordecai took her in and raised her as his own daughter. They are both taken into captivity. All right. They are slaves in captivity. But before the book ends, Mordecai is the prime minister and Esther is the queen. All right. So you got to understand that behind the scenes, God was working the whole time. All right. They start off as slaves. She has lost mother and father. Her cousin is raising her. And before God's finished the story, he's the prime minister and she's the queen. All right. So even though God took his time, his purpose was fulfilled. All right. So those are the passages we're going to look at tonight. So let's jump into it. The book of Esther teaches us that God uses ordinary circumstances to accomplish an extraordinary purpose. All right, let me say that one more time. This book teaches us that God uses ordinary circumstances to accomplish an extraordinary purpose. The amazing thing about Esther is that God's name is never mentioned. All right. There's no prophet that appears. There's no miracle that's recorded. There's no supernatural signs that's given. Instead, the story unfolds in a Persian palace filled with political intrigue, lavish banquets, drinking parties, beauty contests, power struggles, sleepless nights, and royal drama. Sounds like something from BET. All right. Sounds like something from BET. There's some drinking parties, beauty contests, power struggles, sleepless nights, royal drama, political intrigue. In fact, if someone were casually reading Esther for the first time, they might wonder, where is God in all of this? All right. Where is God in all of this? The king is throwing drunken parties. Officials are jockeying for power. A young woman is selected because of her physical beauty. An ambitious politician is plotting genocide. And yet, beside all of these seemingly ordinary events, God is quietly moving every piece into place. All right. And once again, if you just read it and look at it, where is God in all of this? And that's the message of Esther. Here it is. God does not have to announce his presence to exercise his providence. All right. You're not going to walk into a room and you hear God's voice. I'm in here. I'm in here. I got your back. Don't worry. It's not going to happen. You got to know that God is working his providence. You got to know that God is working all things. All right. So God does not have to announce his presence to exercise his providence. Here's the second thing. God does not have to speak audibly to be actively working. Some of you are like me. I don't hear God speaking. He ain't speaking to me right now. I'm listening. God, I'm praying. What decision should I make? And God is not saying anything. And I've shared this with you before. Once you get past Greenwood, it may not say your GPS may not say anything else to you till you get to the split on the other side of Tyler. All right. You are on the right track, even if you don't hear God speaking. But the minute you get off track, you will hear something says, make a U-turn. All right. So if you don't hear God saying anything, don't mean he's not working. All right. Just because you don't hear God speaking, don't mean you're not on the right track. All right. God does not have to speak audibly to be actively working. All right. God does not have to perform a miracle for his hand to be directing events. All right. So many times we're praying for miracles and God said, I'm already working. When you showed up to work today, I'm already working. All right. God does not have to perform miracles. Last but not least, why is this important? Because how many times have you said, God is not in that foolishness? All right. I'm guilty of it. I can be looking at some stuff. I'm like, God ain't in that foolishness. God ain't in that foolishness. But when I read the book of Esther again, God's hand is on all events. His hand is on all circumstances, working all things together for the good. All right. And so that's difficult for us as believers. That's difficult for us as believers to understand that you mean to tell me, Pastor, that they in there getting drunk and having all kind of stuff going on and God's hand is in that? We'll look at that. All right. Often we miss God's hand. Hear me well. Often we miss God's hand because we're looking for the supernatural while God is working through the ordinary. All right. We're looking for something big and bold. And God has said, no, I'm working in the ordinary day-to-day events. The stuff you're taking for granted, that's what I'm working in. All right. So many times we miss God's hand because we're looking for the supernatural. And also we're waiting for a miracle while God is arranging circumstances already. All right. So here's the shout. Here's the shout. Many times, if you're like me, you're praying for a sign. God, I don't want to mess this up. Give me a sign. Give me a sign. Give me something to let me know I'm on the right track. And while we're praying for a sign, God is already opening and closing doors. You're sitting there in the hallway waiting for a sign, and the door is already open. Because once you've prayed and once God has spoken, he's not going to keep telling you the same thing over and over. Just trust the word he's already given you. All right. If he told you last week what you need to be doing, ain't nothing going to change this week. All right. So you're praying for a sign while God has already opened and closed some doors. All right. And another reason why we miss God's hand is because we're looking for God in the dramatic while he's often moving through the details of everyday life. Every day, God is working on your behalf, all right? And you're waiting on something big, something bold, and God says, no, I'm already working. And this is why we miss God's timing, or we misunderstand God's timing, because we're waiting on results, and God is saying it's already done. We're waiting on results before we shout. God has said it's already done. All right. So the truth is, many of the greatest things that God has done in your life did not happen in a church service. Pastor, you're treading in deep water. You're treading in deep water. Many of the greatest things that God has done in your life did not happen in a church service. All right. And the book of Esther teaches us that God is just as active in the palace as he is in the sanctuary. He's just as present in the boardroom as he is in the prayer room. He's just as involved in everyday circumstances as he is in extraordinary miracles. All I'm trying to tell you is we keep missing God because we put him in a spiritual box, and God is sharing with us, I'm involved in every area of your life. When you go to work, when you go to the grocery store, the hand of God is active in all events. All right. So watch this. Even when God's name is absent, God's hand is active. Even when God's voice is silenced, God's providence is still speaking. All right. Even when life appears ordinary, don't seem like nothing is going your way, God is working behind the scenes. Watch this. He's working behind the scenes in all things to accomplish his purpose. And the reason why we get frustrated is because, like you guys said, you want it in your timing, and you want to know how God's doing it. This is why the greatest thing about walking with God is learning how to trust that God is working. All right. Learning how to trust that God is working. All right. So the book of Esther is an interesting book. And so the first thing we're going to look at is that God is working behind the scenes, and God is regulating what's allowed. All right. We've looked at this for the last 3 weeks. God is regulating what is allowed. All right. So I want to begin with Esther chapter 3. All right. Esther chapter 3. Look at what verse 1 says. Sometime later, King Xerxes promoted Haman over all the nobles, making him the most powerful official in the empire. All right. Haman is the most powerful official in the empire. All the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect whenever he passed by. But Mordecai refused to bow down or show him respect. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. All right. He was filled with rage because people wouldn't bow down, especially Haman. All right. He learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes. All right. Dispatches were sent by swift messengers into all the province of the empire, giving the order that all Jews, young and old, including women and children, must be killed, slaughtered, and annihilated on one single day. And that day was scheduled to happen on March 7th of the next year. All right, let that sink in. One person refused to bow down. And Haman says, I'm going to kill all y'all. I'm going to kill the whole race. I'm going to destroy all of y'all, and I'm going to do it next year on March the 7th. God's timing, God's timing, God's timing, God's timing. Here's what I want to drive home. In chapter 3, there's a plot to kill all the Jews. In chapter 3, there's a plot to kill all the Jews. Haman is elevated to a powerful and prominent position, and his desire is to eliminate a whole race of people. Sound familiar? Haman is elevated to a powerful and prominent position, and his desire is to eliminate a whole race of people. The plot is in place. The date has been selected, and the desired outcome is established. All right. So in chapter 3, Haman got this good position. All right. He's powerful in the kingdom. And he says, by this time next year, all y'all gonna be gone. All right. So they put the plot in place. They selected the date. But while they are plotting, God was already positioning. All right. Before Haman had a title, Esther already had a crown. Woo, Lord have mercy. The enemy thought he was writing the final chapter, but he was actually writing into a story God had already begun shaping in chapter 2. Before the threat in chapter 2 even existed, God had already established the outcome. That ought to be a word for somebody tonight. You're sitting here worried about what they're doing in chapter 3. You're sitting here worried about what they did in the month of June. You're sitting here worried about what they did today on July 1. God says, baby, I fixed that in January. I already put the person in place while they were plotting. While they were plotting, I already had somebody in position, because I don't wait until the plot is put in place. I already have my plan already designed. And somebody ought to just sleep well tonight knowing that God has already positioned the answer before they even plotted against you, because the Bible says no weapon formed against you shall be able to prosper. And here's the first shout of the night. God allowed the decree, but he had already positioned the deliverer. All right. Here's the shout. Here's the shout. You're crying saying, God, why you let them put this in place? God, why you let them put this in place? God, why you let Project 2025 get in place? God, why you won't stop Project 2025? God says, I'm not worried about the decree. I've already positioned the deliverer. I've already positioned something in place. And God says, why don't you trust my word and quit worrying about my timing? So for somebody, they done heard March 7th next year, they're going to get us March 7th. So for a whole year, they're living in stress, and God has already worked it out. And that's my word for somebody here tonight. You're trying to figure it out, and God sent me to tell you tonight, go ahead and rest. He's already worked it out. All right. God allowed the decree. Go ahead and put your plan in place. Go ahead and put the decree in place. I've already positioned the deliverer, all right? Because I started with chapter 3 because I want you to know what the plot is. The plot is to take them all out. The plot is to take them all out. But watch this. Behind the scenes, God is already regulating what's allowed, all right? So here's what I want to drive home. The positioning process was more practical than religious. All right. The positioning process was more practical than religious. All right. So watch this. Esther chapter 1. Watch this. At that time, Xerxes ruled his empire from his royal throne at the fortress of Susa. In the third year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. He invited all the military officers of Persia and Media, as well as the princes and nobles of the province. The celebration lasted 180 days. Whoa, you're talking about a party. 100 days, a tremendous display of the opulent wealth of his empire and the pomp and splendor of his majesty. So for 180 days, everybody is celebrating the king. Verse number 7, drinks were served in gold goblets of many designs, and there was an abundance of royal wine. All right, there was abundance of royal wine, reflecting the king's generosity. All right, by edict of the king. Watch what he says. No limits were placed on the drinking. No limits were placed on the drinking. For the king had instructed all his palace officials to serve each man as much as he wanted. See this? See, that shouldn't even be in the Bible. That shouldn't even be in the Bible. I don't even know why God put that in the Bible. Let me tell you why he put it in the Bible. Because many of you keep missing your blessing because you keep looking from the outside. Say, God ain't in that. God ain't in that. But when you understand the hand of God, it's more practical than religious. All right? So the king has this huge party, and everybody is drinking as much as they want to. Watch verse 10. On the 7th day of the feast, when King Xerxes was in high spirits because of the wine, he told the 7 eunuchs who attended him, bring Queen Vashti to him with the royal crown on her head. He wanted the nobles and all the other men to gaze on her beauty, for she was a very beautiful woman. Look at the text. He's full of that wine. He's in high spirits, as the text says. He's in high spirits, and he says, hey, go get my boo, bring my wife in here. I want everybody to see my wife. I want to put her on display. All right? Once again, this shouldn't be in the Bible. All right, so he brings her out, but when they conveyed the king's order to Queen Vashti, she refused to come. This made the king furious, and he burned with anger. God is positioning, he's positioning his deliverer in place because he knows the plot is coming. All right, so here's the shout. God orchestrates removal that made room for Esther. Let me say that one more time. God orchestrates removal that made room for Esther. Many of you are trying to use manipulation. You're trying to find somebody in the office that know the supervisor, and so you say, hey, put in a word for me. No. When you are walking in purpose with God, God will orchestrate a position by removing who needs to be removed so you can get where God wants you to be. Whew, Lord have mercy. That's why you don't have to use manipulation when you trust in God's orchestration. All right? You don't have to use manipulation when God is working behind the scenes to put you in the place where you need to be. All right, so watch this. How did the position become available? Hey, they were getting drunk and he wanted her to come out. She said no, he got mad and put her out. And that opened up the space for God's person to get in. This is what I love about this. There's nothing religious about that. God uses practical things to put his people in place. And that's why I say we keep missing God move because we're so religious and so churchy that we miss that God is involved in everything. All right? So watch this. God is orchestrating a position for Esther. Watch what he does. He uses a drunk king, a wounded ego, and a queen who refused to be humiliated. This is what God used to get that person in place to operate in his purpose. So here's the question. So you thought it was your resume. You thought it was your resume. You thought it was your intellect. You thought it was your knowledge. You thought it was all about you. And God's like, no, I hate to bust your bubble, but I was the one that put you there because I had purpose in mind. Somebody needed to see you be who you are in Christ so that they can get their life together. And the whole time you're thinking it was all about you, but God is orchestrating removal to make room for you. All right. So you got to understand that. Watch this. God is not limited to religious means to accomplish divine purpose. He's not limited to religious means to accomplish divine purpose. God will use whatever's necessary to get you where you need to be. Last but not least, God is not concerned about optics. He's concerned about outcome. I need to get Esther in that position. So many people are looking like that can't be God. God ain't in that. God ain't in all that drinking and all that foolishness. The Bible says God allowed this to happen. He arranged for this to happen so he can get his person in there. God is not concerned about how it looks from the outside. God is not concerned about optics. That's only church people. He's concerned about outcome. All right. He's concerned about the outcome. He says, before they put the plot in place in chapter 3, I already got my person in place. But, Pastor, somebody's already in the position. Your gift will make room for you. This is why I tell people all the time, I never have to manipulate. I never have to plot, because if I need a door open, God's going to open it. And if I get somebody to open it for me, they can close it for me. All right. So you got to understand, wait on the Lord and be of good cheer. All right. And he will orchestrate in his own time and in his own way. All right. So watch this. He's regulating what's allowed. Watch this. The positioning process was more practical than religious. Watch this. In chapter 2. So his personal attendants, after Queen Vashti didn't come and he got rid of her, so his personal attendants suggested, let us search the empire to find beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint agents in his province to bring these beautiful young women into the royal harem at the fortress of Susa. After that, the young woman who most pleases the king will be made queen instead of Vashti. Watch this. Watch this. Here's a key line. This advice was very appealing to the king. Watch this. So he put the plan into effect. Watch this. God had already had a plan in place. So he used the king to line his plan with God's plan. That's why you ain't got to worry about, but he ain't gonna let nobody get in. He ain't gonna do that. No. The king's heart is in the hand of God. The king's heart is in the hand of God. And you got to understand, if purpose is involved, God will use their plan for evil for his good. All right. So watch this. He's working his plan. This is what I love about it. This is why I want to drive this home tonight. God did not use a church growth conference or a Sunday school seminar to position Esther. He did not use a church growth conference or a Sunday school seminar to position Esther. He used a beauty contest. All right. The design was natural, but the plan was supernatural. Oh, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. God says, I know you think she ought to, the king should have went somewhere and said, hey, where's the best Sunday school teacher? Who's the best at praying and who's got the most faith? No. God says, I need somebody pretty to be put in position because I need somebody in that position to serve my purpose. And so God uses a beauty contest. That there's nothing supernatural about a beauty contest. The design is natural. God's plan was supernatural. And here's what I want to drive home tonight. I want you to hear me well on this. God can use the broken systems of this world to position us for purpose. You're sitting there waiting on something religious to put you where you need to be. No, God is saying, I can use the plans of the person that's in the White House right now with all of these plots, with all of these schemes, with all of these redistricting. I can use the broken system to position my people for purpose. So why should I feel discouraged? Why should I sit around moaning and complaining? God is using what they are doing, their plots, their schemes, their plans, and he's positioning us for purpose. And the reason why we keep missing it is because we don't think God is in nothing like that. God can't be in that. God can't be in that, man of God. No. All that drinking, God can't be in that. God cannot be in that. And this is the reason why we keep missing the moves of God. We keep missing the moves of God. Watch this. Although she had beauty, she still needed God's favor. So instead of Esther's beauty, that's what she used. Instead of beauty, put your skill in there. although you got intellect, although you can do this stuff good. This is what he said. Although you got that to get in, you still need God's favor. You still need God's favor. Watch this. Watch this. I love the text. Esther chapter 2, verse 8 and 9. When the king's order had been proclaimed, many girls were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai. The girl pleased him and won his favor. Yeah. So the person that's in charge of bringing everybody look good. Everybody looked good. They went out and they brought in the best of the best, but God's favor made you stand out. And I know, Pastor, I'm smarter than most of them. I'm smarter. I can do this better than most people. No. That's the hand of God on your life. That's the favor of God on your life. Because I could testify there were many people who should have been in the place you are. There were many people more qualified, but the hand of God's favor opened up that door for you. The text says many girls came, but you found favor. Oh, Lord have mercy. Esther 2 and 15. When the turn came for Esther to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai had told her. Esther won the favor, watch this, of everyone who saw her. Okay? She's got beauty, but so does everybody else. She needed God's favor. Verse 17. Now the king, Haggai liked her. Everyone else liked her, but that don't matter. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Here's the shout. Here's the shout. Here's the shout. What separates you from everybody else? Here it is, the favor of God on your life. And this is why I tell people all the time, it's not arrogance, it's not conceited. I'm just not going to bow down and kiss nobody's ring in order to get what God has for me. When you got the favor of God, I might not be your favorite, but God has given me favor. All right? And watch this. When I met Haggai, God gave me favor with him. When I met everybody else, God gave me favor with them. But when I got to the king, I didn't need the favor of Haggai. I didn't need the favor of everyone else. God gave me the favor of the king. So watch this. Even if you don't have favor today, when you get to where you need to be, favor will be on your life. Lord have mercy, Jesus. And this is why people, especially believers, if the door haven't opened yet, it's not time yet. If the door hadn't opened yet, it's not time yet. Because when you get there, the favor of God will open up doors that no man can close. And I like that because all of them look good. All of them were brought in, but the favor of God was on you. That's what separates you from everybody else. That's what separates you from everybody else. All right? So this is what I want to drive home. God is regulating what's allowed, but the positioning process is more practical than religious. All right? And so make sure you don't miss the hand of God moving in your life, because in your mind, God can't be in that. God can't be in that. That was just coincidence. That was just no. God had them removed. God had them removed so he can put you in that position. All right. Even though Saul had the position, he was getting David ready. All right. And when Saul was rejected, God just slid David right in there. And that's all I'm trying to tell you. Quit worrying about who's in your spot. Quit worrying about who got your job. When it's time for you to get in the seat, God will open up a position. All right. When it's time for you to get in the seat, God will open up a position. All right. So let's pause right here. Let's pause right here. Let's chime in on that for a quick second. How difficult is it to recognize the hand of God in everyday, ordinary affairs. Why do we miss it, especially believers? Why do we miss the hand of God in ordinary activities? Let's talk about it for a minute. Unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Why do we miss the hand of God in ordinary activities? All right, that's just the way life is. No, God is orchestrating every area of our lives. And so let's transition to the second one. Behind the scenes, God is regulating what's allowed, but also behind the scenes, God is preparing for what is next. All right. God is preparing for what is next. All right. I want you to hear me well on this one. Before Esther wears a crown, she wears grief. All right. Before she wears a crown, she wears grief. All right. So that's the season where we struggle. All right. That's the season where many of us give up. We see how God orchestrated Vashti to be removed and Esther. We like that part. But go back to verse 5. And it starts off by saying, at that time, there was a Jewish man in the fortress of Susa whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair. His family had been among those who had been exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. This man had a very beautiful and lovely young cousin, Hadassah, who's also was called Esther. When her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her into his family and raised her as his own daughter. All right. So imagine Esther. Imagine Esther as a young girl. Mother gone, father gone. I'm in exile in Babylon. All right, I'm in exile in Babylon. I've lost my mother, I've lost my father, and I'm adopted by my big cousin, and he's raising me. All right, he's raising me in this unknown territory. If somebody would have told her in that season, you're going to wear a crown, all right, you're going to be queen, she wouldn't have believed it. All right, she wouldn't have believed it, because in that season where we're wearing grief, it's hard for us to picture us wearing a crown. And that's why we got to understand and trust God's timing. Because this chapter, all I see is tears. But there's another chapter that has a greater testimony. So don't give up in this chapter of tears. Picture yourself when this is over. When this is over, God has something greater for me. All right. So behind the scenes, God is preparing for what's next. All right. God is preparing for what's next. All right. So what looks like a season of constant loss is often the hand of God writing a script for success. All right. Right now, it don't look like nothing's happening. My mother's gone, my father's gone. I'm in slavery in Babylon, in this foreign land, and my cousin Mordecai is taking care of me. What looks like a season of constant loss is often the hand of God writing a script for your success. All right. So Pastor, I just don't understand why I'm going through this. I don't understand why all of this brokenness. Here's what I want to drive home. God does not waste broken seasons. He uses them for preparation. I believe I got one or two witnesses who can look in the rearview mirror tonight and say, Pastor, I've had some broken seasons. Matter of fact, I'm in one now. And I can tell you tonight, God don't waste broken seasons. He uses them for preparation. All right? He uses them for preparation. Well, Pastor, how is me losing my mother? How is me losing my father? How is me in slavery, chilling with my big cousin, helping me for what God has? Watch this. God was preparing Esther in the midst of grief. How? By establishing a strong relationship with Mordecai. I don't know what kind of relationship she had with her mother and father. They might not have been as bold as Mordecai. So God needed her to be around Mordecai. He needed her to learn how to obey Mordecai. He needed her to listen to Mordecai, take Mordecai's counsel, watch this, in grief, so that she'll listen to him in the palace. And somebody can testify that friend that walked with you in your stormy season, that friend that stood by you in your stormy season, that relationship is as strong now as it's ever been because they saw you when you was down, they helped you when you was down, and now that you're in the palace, it's the same person. Oh, Lord have mercy. It's the same person. So watch this. God in only his sovereign way could allow her to lose mother, father, be in slavery. And at the same time, I need for you to listen to Mordecai. I need for you to learn from Mordecai. I need for you to obey Mordecai because there's going to come a time when Mordecai need to challenge you to trust God. God. Let's look at it. Let's look at it. Let's look at it. Esther chapter 2, verse 20. All right. So he raises her. He raises her. So Esther continued to keep her family background and nationality a secret. All right. Don't go in there doing no talking. Don't go in there doing all that talking about I'm a Jew. I'm gonna keep it 100. Don't go in there with all that. Don't go in there with all that. He says, so she was still following. Listen to this word. She was still following Mordecai's direction. Why did he put that word still in there? Why he put that word still in there? She was still following Mordecai's directions, just as she did when she lived in his home.
That's it right there.
They're in the palace now. They're in the palace now. And the text says she's still following Mordecai's directions, just as she did when she lived in his home. All right. So she's in the palace now. She's in the palace now. She's got a crown on her head, but she's still following the directions she did when God connected them in that grief season. Ooh, Lord have mercy. Let's look at one more. Let's look at one more. The one that we know so well. Mordecai sent Esther this word. Don't think for a moment. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape from all other Jews and are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just a time as this. It was Mordecai who challenged her. It was Mordecai who gave her instructions. It was Mordecai who gave her directions on how to handle prosperity. Why? Because he was with her in time of grief. And it was in that season where God established a strong relationship between Mordecai and Esther. So what does that mean, Pastor? God established a bond before he opened the door. God established a bond before he opened the door. God sent the person before the purpose. And God sent the person for the purpose. All right. So watch this. Watch this. That person that's been with you, that person that's been with you, that person that's helped you, that shaped you, that molded you, they prepared you for such a time as this. And like I said, I don't know. The Bible doesn't say too much about her mother, father. We don't know, but we don't know if they could have raised her like Mordecai. We don't know if they could have encouraged her like Mordecai. So God sent him to get her ready for purpose. And this is why it's dangerous. This is why it's dangerous for you to cut people off just because you done made it a little bit. That's why it's dangerous to cut people off just because you got a couple of nickels to rub together. You don't understand who you gonna need for purpose. You can cut them off because you got the position, but there are some people God has put in your life strictly for purpose. All right. So God established a bond before he opened the door. And this is the power of God behind the scenes, even in her season of grief, even when she's lost everything, God put Mordecai in her life. And all of us can look back, over our lives and think about that one person who's been there for us when we was down, when we was up, that one person that can cover you and check you at the same time. That's what I like about Mordecai. Mordecai said, hey, I know you're the queen, but don't you forget. Don't you forget. And you need that person. You need that person. So what is God doing? God is preparing for what is next. He sent her a Mordecai at an early age to prepare her for such a time as this. All right. So let's go to the third one. Behind the scenes, God is fighting battles you can't see. All right. Behind the scenes, God is fighting battles you can't see. Look at verse number 3 once again. Chapter 3 once again. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow or show him respect, he was filled with rage. He had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai by himself. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes. All right. So, what does that mean? What is that saying to us? There's a moment in every great season of conflict when you realize the battle is bigger than you thought. Who am I talking to tonight? You in that season, and you done jumped out there on that limb and you say, I'm strong, I can do all things in Christ. And then there was that one moment. There was one moment in that season where you say, you know what? this battle is bigger than I thought. I thought it was just a few people didn't like me. I know these people trying to take me out. All right. So there's gonna come a moment, in every season of conflict where you realize the battle is bigger than you thought. That there's going to come a moment, and if not, then you're not operating in the will of God. If you haven't gotten to that place where something was so big you couldn't handle it by yourself, you had to take that to God. All right. And that's what's happening in this text. God is allowing Mordecai to raise the stakes. All right. He's allowing Mordecai to raise the stakes so that Mordecai and Esther can realize this battle is bigger than us. It's bigger than us. All right. So what looks like a personal battle between Haman and Mordecai turns out to be spiritual warfare. All right, let that sink in for a minute. You're thinking it's just that one person on your job. It's just that one person. No, it's bigger than that. The enemy says, I can use her to get you distracted. I can use them to get you off course. And so you're sitting there trying to battle that one person, and you got to understand, like Peter, enemy has sent them to sift you like wheat. All right. So you got to understand, this is not just no personal battle with you and that other person in the cubicle. This is spiritual warfare. You cannot handle this on your own. All right. You cannot handle this on your own. Let God fight your battles. All right. So you got to understand that behind the scenes, God is working. God is fighting battles. What appears to be political is actually spiritual. Watch this. Why? Because this is a satanic assault on the bloodline of the Messiah. We talked about this last week. He wants to kill all the Jews because Jesus is coming from this bloodline. All right. So you got to understand. Well, I ain't worried about this. It's just that one person. No, all they're trying to do is trying to get you off track. All right. Trying to get you off track. But here's what I discovered. If that one person keeps you on your knees, they're serving their purpose. If that one person keeps you on your knees, they're serving their purpose. And somebody can testify, you wouldn't pray like you pray if it wasn't for that person. You wouldn't be calling on the name of the Lord if it wasn't for that person. So God says, this is spiritual warfare. I'm letting that personal battle strengthen you in the process. But watch this. Don't fight. Let me fight the battles. You stay on your knees. All right. So you got to get to this point where you understand God is fighting that battle. This is bigger than you thought. It's not about one person. All right. You have purpose on your life, and the enemy says, I'm going to use them to get you off track. I'm going to use them to get you off track. And you sitting up all night trying to figure out how you going to do this to this person, how you going to get rid of this person, how you going to do this with this person. And God says, no. Let me fight the battles. You stay focused on purpose. And watch this. This is why God works behind the scenes to keep his covenant promise. He was protecting his redemptive plan. He said, I got to make sure the Jews stay alive because Jesus is coming through this bloodline. See, you're thinking it's all about you. But watch this. To accomplish his purpose, God has to arrange circumstances and orchestrate events to defeat the enemy's plan. Somebody can testify. The enemy tried to take you out 10 years ago, but God had a plan for your life. All right. God had a plan for your life. That's why the foolishness couldn't kill you. That's why the car wreck couldn't kill you. That's why the disease couldn't kill you. That's why the divorce didn't make you lose your mind, because you was going to need your mind when you executed God's plan. All right. So you got to understand that God is fighting battles you can't see. And here's what I know you're saying. Here's what you're saying. Well, Pastor, I'm not sure because I hadn't experienced that. Here it is. There are some moments that God is orchestrating that you hadn't put the dots together yet. Yeah, I'm talking to somebody tonight. That there's some things God orchestrated, and you called them coincidence, and that was God fighting battles you ain't know nothing about. All right. And I told you last week, here's what they're called: just happen moments. Somebody knows what it's like to have some just happen moments. Okay, Pastor, what does that look like? What does that look like? Listen to what the text says. One day, as Mordecai was on duty at the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs were on guards at the door of the king's private quarters. They became angry at King Xerxes and plotted to assassinate him. All right, let that sink in. Mordecai, one day, listen to this word, one day, Mordecai was on duty at the king's gate. He ain't in the palace, he's at the gate. And two eunuchs are mad at the king and they're plotting how to assassinate him. But Mordecai heard about the plot and gave the information to Queen Esther. She then told the king about it and gave Mordecai credit for the report. When an investigation was made and Mordecai's story was found to be true, the two men were impaled on a sharpened pole. This was all recorded in the book of the history of King Xerxes' reign. All right, let that sink in. He's out by the gate one day, just chilling, minding his business. And then, as my man Deacon LaCour said, he was ear hustling. He was sitting there ear hustling, and he heard them talking about killing the king. So he told Esther, who's in the house while he's at the gate, tell the king this for me. Then Esther told the king heard about it, investigated, it was true, put it in the book. Ah, Lord have mercy. Put it in the book. Watch this. Here it is. Mordecai just happened to overhear a conversation. He just happened to overhear a conversation. You remember that one time when you just happened to hear something and it changed your whole life? I was getting ready to go over here, but then I overheard a conversation. I overheard this. That's God working. All right. So Mordecai just happened to hear a conversation. All right. And watch this. His name is written in the book. His name is written in the book. All right. So watch Esther chapter 6. That night, not the other night, that night, the king had trouble sleeping. So he ordered an attendant to bring the book of the history of his reign so it can be read to him. In those records, he discovered an account of how Mordecai had exposed the plot of Bithana and Teresh. They had plotted to assassinate King Xerxes. And here's what he said. What reward or recognition did we ever give to Mordecai for this? His attendants replied, nothing has been done for him. Wait a minute. Here's a shout. See, you thought God had forgot about that deed you did. You mad because they didn't say thank you. You mad because they didn't reward you. You mad because nobody called your name. If your name is written in the book, he hadn't forgot about you. Oh, Lord have mercy. He in chapter 2, he overhears a conversation. In chapter 2, they write it in the book. But in chapter 6, he can't sleep. in chapter 6, he can't sleep. And so he said, hey, bring me the book so I can read it and fall back to sleep. All right. And it just happened. Watch this. The king just happened to not be able to sleep. And watch this. The attendants just happened to read the story of Mordecai. They opened up this big old book and it just happened to fall on that page talking about Mordecai. All I'm trying to tell you is God is fighting unseen battles and he puts in some just happen moments. Just happen. just happened to hear about. Just happened to hear about a young kid over at Avenue. Just happened to hear about he can teach. Hey, just happened to have him to come and put in his resume. Just happened to happen. And here we are 14 years later. All I'm just trying to tell you is God can put some just happen moments in your life to get you where you need to be when you need to be there. Oh, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. Can I go a little deeper? Can I go a little deeper? Watch this in chapter 6. In chapter 6, right after they tell him, we didn't do nothing for him. We didn't do nothing for him. I like this. We didn't do nothing for him. Watch what happens. He says, who is that? Who is that in the outer court? Who is that in the outer court? And watch this. As it happened, Haman had just arrived in the outer court of the palace to ask the king to impale Mordecai on the pole he had prepared. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I can't sleep. I can't sleep. I can't sleep. Hey, king, here's the book. What did we do for Mordecai? We didn't do nothing for him. Who is that out there? Who is that out there in the court? Oh, that's Haman. That's Haman. That's Haman. He's getting ready to come and tell you that we need to put Mordecai on this pole and kill him. So the attendants replied to the king, Haman is out there in the court. Bring him in. Bring him in, the king ordered. So Haman came in, and the king said, what shall I do to honor a man who truly pleases me? Here it is. Haman thought to himself, whom would the king wish to honor more than me? He got to be talking about me. So watch this. Since it's for me, I'm going to go all out. Yeah, Haman must have been Baptist. He must have been Baptist. Watch this. Since it's for me, since he talking about me, I'm going to go all out. Watch what he said. If the king wishes to honor someone, he should bring out one of the king's own royal robes, as well as a horse that the king himself has ridden, one with royal emblem on his head. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials, and let him see that that man whom the king wishes to honor is dressed in the king's robe and led through the city square on the king's horse. Have the officials shout as they go. This is what the king does for someone who wishes to honor. Look how he goes all out. Look how he goes all out when he thinks it's about him. Oh, Lord have mercy. I could do a whole Bible study right there. He goes out when he thinks it's about him. He said, hey, man, don't spare no expense, king. Don't spare no expense. Watch what the king says in verse 10. Excellent. Excellent. Quick, take the robe and my horse and do just as you said for Mordecai the Jew. He's sitting at the gate of the palace. Leave out nothing you have suggested. Oh, boy, I'm about to shout. I am about to shout. I am about to shout because he's coming in to tell the king we need to put him on a pole. He's coming in to tell the king we need to take him out. And God has so orchestrated a just so happened moment that he's the one who's going to put the robe on me. He's the one that's going to bring me the horse. He's the one that's going to put a parade in my honor. Lord, won't God do it? God will do it. Watch this. Haman just happened to come into the court at that time. What he meant for evil, God worked it for good. And I believe I got one or two witnesses who can testify that they plotted to get you. They plotted to take you out. They plotted to embarrass you. But what they meant for evil, God worked that thing for good. And you ought to shout tonight for some just so happened moments. Just so happened that God worked it out when he worked it out. All right? So watch this. All these things happen, and here's what we do. Here's what we do in the church. Here's what we do. We call it coincidence. Ooh, it was just a coincidence. Ooh, we call it lucky. I got lucky. I got lucky. It fell right when it did. We call it being in the right place at the right time, but I come to give you the right word for it. It's called divine providence. It's called divine providence. And somebody ought to be able to tell God, thank you tonight for putting you in the right place at the right time. God did it. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't happenstance. It was God's favor, God's divine providence that worked all things together for your good. Oh, Lord, have mercy. So these are some just so happened moments when God is fighting your battles. He's trying to take him out. And God says, I got this. I got this. I got this. Watch this. And it happened because the man couldn't sleep. It didn't happen because of Sunday school. It didn't happen because of Bible study. It didn't happen because of some conference. It happened because the man couldn't sleep and he started reading the book. And watch this. Don't get upset because you're not recognized today. God will recognize you in due season. Lord have mercy. Let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. Let's wrap it up. I'm having too much fun. Let's wrap it up. I'm having too much fun. So watch this. Behind the scenes, God is regulating what's allowed. Behind the scenes, God is fighting battles. God is preparing you for what's next. Here's the last one. I want to combine 4 and 5 tonight. Behind the scenes, God is producing something inside. Behind the scenes, God is producing something inside. When we talked about Joseph and we talked about Peter and we talked about Job, we dealt with humility and character. But tonight I want to put it all together. He's producing something inside. Listen to what Esther 2 and 7 says. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, who was also known as Esther. Watch what the text says. Was lovely in form and features. Listen to what the Bible says. Listen to what the Bible says. Esther was lovely in form and features. Translation. Esther was a brick house. Esther was a bad member. Esther was bad. Esther was bad. This is what the Bible says. In chapter 2, verse 7, Esther was lovely in form and features. Look at verse 17. And the king loved Esther more than any other woman. He was so delighted in her that he set the royal crown on her head and declared her queen instead of Vashti. Here it is. Esther got the position of queen because of her beauty. We ain't going to try to spiritualize it. We ain't going to try to do none of that. She got the position of queen. Why? Because she was bad. She was beautiful. All right? So watch this. Her exterior opened the door. Ooh, teach, Pastor. She got the position because her exterior beauty opened the door. The same door that beauty opened, beauty alone could not keep her standing in. There was a moment when Esther's purpose demanded more than appearance. And I'm talking to somebody here tonight. You're trying to get that position and you going in there and you got stuff showing and you got the dress up to your thighs and you trying to make sure you get the position. And I'm just trying to tell you, it may get you in the door. But you got to have more than appearance to fulfill God's purpose. Teach, Pastor. You got to understand that beauty can get you in some doors. Brains can get you in some doors. Intellect can get you in some doors. But there's going to come a moment that it's got to go deeper than the surface. It got to be deeper than the surface. All right? So watch this. Esther 4:13, the passage we've been talking about all night. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace with your beautiful self, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast from me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. Watch this. If I must die, I must die. Beauty can get you in. But when you have to stand and do God's will, it's going to demand something more than appearance. She says to Mordecai, I got you. If I got to die, I got to die. What do you mean, Pastor? You can have the position and still be passive and not fulfill your purpose. I see this all the time. God has put some people in position that can help the community. He's put some people in position that can help the least, the lost, and the left out. He's put some people in position that can come back and pull some other people out of the same place God pulled them out. But then they get in the position and they get quiet. They get in the position and they think they did it all by themselves. And they become passive and don't fulfill the purpose that God put them in. That's why we got people in position, but they're passive and the purpose is not being fulfilled. You got to understand, if God put you there for a purpose, you need the courage to go along with your intellect, your beauty, or whatever got you in the door. All right. So you got to understand that God is producing something on the inside. Out exterior beauty can get you in, but God has to put something in you to serve the purpose. So what does she say? What does she say? She says, my maids and I are going to do the same thing you guys are doing. We're not going to eat. We're not going to drink for 3 days, 3 nights. And then it's against the law, but I'm going to go into the king. If I must die, I must die. All right. Esther was born with beauty. No doubt about that. She was born with beauty, but Esther's courage had to be cultivated. All right. She was born with beauty, but Esther's courage had to be cultivated. Here's what was happening the whole time. God was building the courage on the inside, not for position, but for purpose. Here's where I want to drive the last stake in tonight. You keep praying that God opened the door for the position. And God says, you got all the intellect, you got all of the things, you got the brains, you got the beauty, you got everything that can get you in the position. But the reason why I haven't put you in the position is because you don't have what you need on the inside. So that's why I'm taking you through this process to cultivate the right spirit so you can fulfill your purpose. You keep praying for the position so you can get more money. God says, no, I'll meet your need. I'll give you overflow. I'll give you abundance. It's not about that. I won't put you in because you don't have what you need on the inside. How is your character? How is your integrity? Are you still bitter about when they overlooked you the last time? And so when you get the position, you're going to make everybody. So you already got it in your mind. As soon as I get this position, I'm going to make them remember what they did to me. And God says, no, you got the wrong spirit. So I will close every door until you begin to be cultivated on the inside. So while you're praying for the position, God is saying, no, I'm cultivating you for purpose. I'm cultivating you for purpose, not the position. Because I've discovered God will let you do more without the position than people who sitting in the position. They got the position, but they need to come to you to ask you how to do it. Whew, Lord have mercy. They got to come to you. They're making all the money. They got all the position. Their name is on the programs. Their name is in the bulletins. They got all the money. They're making the good money, but they got to come to you because you got the purpose. All right. So don't get caught up in the position. Don't get caught up in the position. Let God build you up on the inside so you can fulfill purpose. Because I've discovered the position can give you a check, but faithfulness to your purpose can give you some rewards. And I believe I got 1 or 2 witnesses who can testify God's rewards will stay on you longer than a paycheck. God's rewards will open up the door even if you don't have money. All right. So you got to understand, if you don't have the position, it's not because they hating. It's not because they racist. It's not because of all this other stuff. If you don't have it, God says you're not ready or you don't need it. Oh, good God Almighty. You don't need it. All right. You don't need it. If you got the position, it's going to take up more of your time. It's going to take up more of your time, and you won't be able to serve me effectively. And this is why I pray. I pray for our people, because sometimes we're serving God effectively. We're serving God good, and then we get the position. We don't have time for God no more. So God says, no, I already know what you're going to do when you get the position. Because while you're broke, you're praying and fasting and coming to church. But then the minute you get the position, you got to go golfing on weekends. You got to go vacationing on weekends. God says, no, I close the door because you don't have the right spirit for the position. So God is building something on the inside, not for position, but for purpose. All right? not for position, but for purpose. All right. And notice this. Notice this. When Mordecai sends her the message, she did not go to the king on the strength of her beauty. That got her in the door, but that wouldn't solve this problem. She spent time praying and fasting for internal strength to take action. I was sharing with somebody the other day. They wanted me to be in prayer for them about a position, so we were talking about it. And they said that they were taking some AI classes to make sure they had the right skills. They were doing this and this and this. And I said, "Have you prayed and fasted about it?" No, I hadn't done that yet. Hadn't done it yet. I said, "Well, some situation, you're gonna need strength. You're gonna need strength, not strategy. You're gonna need strength, not skills." So this is what Esther teaches us. She already got the crown on her head. She needs to display courage. So it's not the crown, it's the courage. So in order to get the courage to fulfill God's purpose, she had to spend time praying and fasting to God. You can't do what God called you to do if you don't spend time talking to Him. All right. So she spent time praying and fasting for internal strength. Watch this, to take action. And everybody can go through this. Everybody will go through this season. There will be a moment when your position is challenged by your purpose. God put you in the position so you can display integrity and character. And if you're doing the same thing that the wicked people are doing, then you're more concerned about keeping your position or impressing people with your position than you are walking in God's purpose. There ought to be something different because you're in the position. But if you're doing the same wicked, crooked stuff that they're doing, you have become challenged by the position and you're afraid to operate in purpose. Because if God opened the door, they can't fire you. Oh, Lord have mercy. If God put you there for purpose, they can't get rid of you. So quit compromising to keep the position and stay faithful and courageous to God so you can fulfill purpose. Teach, Pastor. So you got to understand there's going to come a moment. Where are you more concerned about this position or are you going to be challenged by purpose? All right. So this is what Esther shows us, and we're going to wrap it up with this. This is what Esther shows us, and we're going to wrap it up with this. Listen to what happens. As they were drinking wine on the second day, all right, he have another one of them parties. The king asked again, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Up to half the kingdom will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life. This is my petition. All right. Now, if she'd have stopped right there, that would have been extremely selfish. She said, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. Watch this. God has put you in position not just for you, but so that you can come back and help other people. Nothing frustrates me more than to see somebody that God put at the table to get information, to get resources, to bring back, to help people who were in the same position you were before God elevated you, and you look back at them and say, they need to do like I did. No. God put you there so that you can have a we mentality, so you can have an us mentality, so you can have a my people mentality. And here's what you got to understand. I'm going to close it with this. God is not just interested in getting you the position. There is a bigger purpose in mind. He's not, hear me well tonight. God is not interested in just getting you a position. You can get that by hook or crook. It don't matter. You can get a position any kind of way. God says the position is what I'm going to use for you to fulfill the purpose. She got the crown in chapter 2. They start plotting in chapter 3. And in chapter 7, she finally gets to the king and says, they trying to kill my people. And the story ends by them hanging Haman on the pole that he had designed for Mordecai. That's because the queen was put in position for a bigger purpose. So here's the question tonight. Here's the question tonight. Why did God put you in the position that you're in? Is it for a paycheck? Is it for a paycheck? Is it for you to say, look at me, look at what I've done? Why is God put you in that position? That's the question you got to ask yourself. Because behind the scenes, he's been raising you for such a time as this. I was sharing with the church. I was sharing with the church this weekend, and one of the things that one of the people said that reminded me of what Dr. Harry Blake told me before he passed away. All right, one of the last conversations me and Dr. Blake had, he said, let me just share this with you. He said, you got a unique gift where you're old school like us. Said, but you can relate to these young pastors. He said, I'm gonna speak prophetically over your life. God is going to use you. God's going to use you to be the bridge between multiple generations. God's going to use you to stay connected with what God has done and prepare the next generation for what God is doing. And somebody reminded me that this Sunday. They said to me, man, your teaching, your preaching reaches across multiple generations. And when you understand your purpose, when you understand what God is doing in your life, it's bigger than a platform, it's bigger than a pulpit, it's called purpose. So the question tonight is, have you realized your purpose? And did God put you in position to fulfill your purpose? Oh, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. I love this. I love this. I love this. So when the journey gets frustrating, remind yourself. Remind yourself when the timing is off and you can't see what God's doing and you getting frustrated, remind yourself, self, behind the scenes, God is regulating what's allowed. All right? Self, behind the scenes, God is preparing you for what's next. Self, behind the scenes, God is fighting battles you can't see. Self, behind the scenes, God is producing proven character. Self, behind the scenes, God is producing humility in you. He's not concerned about the position. He's more concerned about preparing you for it. So I wanted to remind you tonight. I wanted to remind you tonight that God brought you to this season for such a time as this.